Autism. Are we hearing that more and more in America? Yeah, we are. And I'm really glad about that. Yesterday, I watched a documentary called Autism in America, and it pretty much shook me up. I had a really difficult time with it. To give you a little bit of background, if you don't know why I'm speaking of autism, my son, who would have been 32 today, was diagnosed with autism at the age of 7, which is pretty late. Then again, he was born in 1993 and autism was not routinely screened for. And I watched this documentary and it raised all sorts of questions for me. They were speaking of regressive autism. I can't remember all of the terms because my gosh, it was hitting me in the face. My son, when he was 7, was diagnosed with autism. When he was born, first minute I held that baby with all this dark black hair in my arms, I knew there was a problem. I can't describe it, but I knew something wasn't right. I had already had 3 babies before that, so I had a little bit to compare. I wasn't really sizing him up against the other kids. I just knew something wasn't right. The first doctor I took him to finally said to me, if you don't want him, I'll take him. That was a wrong thing to say to me. So for 7 years, we traveled from doctor to doctor to doctor, and we were told things like, he's too smart for you. You need parenting classes. You should have never been allowed to adopt this child. So if I had been a first-time mom, that would have really freaked me out. I would have been questioning everything. Thank goodness I wasn't a first-time mom. Joshua had several things going on when he was born. He had a hole in his heart. I was told that he was not adoptable because of the hole in his heart. I think that doctor there is still probably reeling from the backlash he got when he told me that. The problems that we were seeing were you couldn't sing to him. He had to be tightly wrapped. You know, we called it a burrito wrap. He had to have one arm over the other and wrapped tightly. If he had an arm flail or a leg kick, he would go into screaming fits. He couldn't take a lot of noise, stimuli, just normal talking or singing. He would scream. He also didn't have, I guess the best way to describe it would be a fuel gauge. He would eat until he would throw up. He did not know, he didn't have that gauge to say, hey, I'm full. So we ended up going with the pediatrician's recommendations and feeding him what he needed to, for his size and everything. And it was hard because we would feed him a bottle and he would cry and cry and cry and people would say, oh, he's hungry. It's like, no, you don't understand. He's not hungry. We've had this tested. So we were under a lot of scrutiny by other parents. We tried taking Joshua out to restaurants a couple of times. It would not work. He could not take the noise, is what I'm assuming. So we didn't go anywhere for a very long time. He was very sensitive to touch. He couldn't touch the grass. He did not like touching sand. One of the things I think that helped them make the diagnosis at OHSU was when I described him lining up, at that time, VHS tapes. He would line them, he would make this long line of tapes all along the living room. He would line up his toys, his cars. They were all in line. He never played with a toy in the manner it was to be played with. It was always something different. So some of those things really fit with what I was hearing about autism at the time. Joshua was not delayed on any of his milestones. He wasn't delayed in speech. He was not delayed in walking, setting up, rolling over. All of those physical milestones were met. So yesterday when I'm watching this documentary, I'm thinking, did Joshua really have autism? Or maybe it's it's such a spectrum. And I think the reason I went back to that is because I'm constantly questioning myself. What could I have done better to better his life? Where could I have intervened to make his life better? I did everything I knew to do. He was the only one of my kids that went to school full time because he loved going to school. Now, one thing that's kind of weird, when he was in elementary school, he did have a hard time answering people. They would say, "Hey, Joshua, how are you doing?" And we had to teach him to say, "I'm fine. Thank you for asking." But it would come out very robotic. "I'm fine. Thank you for asking." So we got him into special classes for speech and for all sorts of things. And finally, his voice, his reactions became much more natural, much more, I don't really know the word to use, but it wasn't like a child that had problems. He did have, or I should say, he wasn't like a child that had challenges with his speech. After that first little block in elementary school, he did have rage problems where he would just attack without even knowing. He had a special fork he had to eat with that he called his Batman fork. Have no idea why. To me, it looked like every other fork we had. He had a special place at the island where he would sit to eat. No one else could sit there but Joshua. He seemed to outgrow a lot of those things as he got older. He was in a lot of special classes at school, in middle school and then in high school. Plus, I had him in therapy. Gosh, it varied. When he was diagnosed with autism, we found a wonderful, wonderful therapist in Portland named Charlene Sabin. Charlene Sabin saw him from the time he was 7 until he turned, I think he was maybe 19 when we stopped taking him to Charlene. And she pretty much confirmed, he's got autism and he has some other mood disorders that are going on. So we didn't know really what the comorbidities were. And I don't think we really ever will know exactly what they were. There were so many things. We tried so many things. He was in therapy all the time. And that was really hard. I look back now and I can see some of my older kids that abused Joshua pretty badly. We're finding out as I went through his medical records after his death. And as I speak to other people and other family members, I'm hearing things that took place when we weren't here. And anger does not even come close to describing the way I feel about what I found out. I had a lot of guilt. Why did I trust these kids? Why didn't I keep Joshua with me all the time? Well, it was impossible to, because if you have a child with autism, you have to have a break. There has to be another caregiver because it's challenging. It's not an easy road. And now that he is gone, he died October 5th of 2021. Now that he's gone, it's really weird because a lot of the difficult feelings and the panic I had around Joshua evaporated, like instantly. And I was left with his smile. People that knew him would come up and talk to me and say, "Hey, in case you didn't know, Joshua did this, he did this." He was so talented with the guitar, with songwriting, with his musical abilities, along with his baking and how creative he was. His mission was to make someone else smile. Well, I found out some things these past 4 years, actually longer than that, before we lost Joshua. And I just sort of filed them away until I was listening to these parents speak last night. And I thought, you know what? I have protected these other people for a very long time for reasons that are selfish in a way, because it affects, maybe not selfish because it will affect other people. But I can't stay silent anymore. I looked back through his birth records and it's been amazing because lately I've had 1, 2, 3, 4 people that are not family members come to me. And I've had a couple of family members come to me, and they all had the same story. That story was that Joshua didn't have autism, but he was extremely abused. They would go into, let me pull up something here so I can read it here. Some of the statements. They would go into things such as, okay, this is a quote from a friend from Texas, and I've had this maybe for 5 years, and it's speaking about me, and it's from a family member that decided the best thing to do was to separate me from my entire family. And the way they did that was by lying about me, about Joshua, that I am a very dangerous and disturbed person. There was a time I might agree with the disturbed. I've never been dangerous. I was misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder. My gosh, who wouldn't be? Bringing up all these kids, a lot of foster kids, all of the kids had problems. I just kind of, put that at the back because it wasn't worth the fight at the time. But when I reread a lot of this and I went through his records from the hospital and through speaking with his therapist again, I thought, you know what? This is crap, and I'm not going to have this label on me any longer. One of the things I have to really say that spoke volumes is the people that were told a lot of this stuff. They didn't come back to me and say, hey, I heard this. What's going on? I know you were having a problem in this situation, but this is like out of character for you. What's happening? None of them did that. And I am so glad because I can look back and I can see the true colors of these people and what they chose to believe. So what was going on? What really disturbed me was how my son, when I was reading his medical records, how abused he was by his older siblings. And I had no clue. I think one of the first things that I thought of was, at that time, my husband and I would go out for coffee on Sunday mornings. We'd be gone a couple of hours and all the kids would be sitting around the living room, and we'd come home and they're all sitting around the living room. And I would think, wow, that's so cool that our kids get along so well. And they're sitting there talking for 2 hours. They weren't talking for 2 hours. As soon as we left the house, they moved the furniture and they threw Joshua and another kid in the middle of the living room, rang the dinner bell, and made them fight with the threat that it would be worse for them if they spoke up and let us know what was going on. That's also in Joshua's medical records. So, I don't really know all that I'm dealing with because a lot of what I saw was not... I very much see autistic traits in my son. I see ADHD in my son, or I did. He ended up developing bipolar disorder. They think bipolar 1, and he ended up manifesting paranoid schizophrenia. All of this is in his medical records. It's all very well documented, along with his bond with me, which is something that was put out amongst other family, that I was torturing Joshua. I was doing things to Joshua. Well, surprise, no. Medical records very clearly stated how close Joshua and I were. And I guess I say that because I know there are a lot of parents out there with autistic children, with family members or friends that need to hide something or judge without knowing the truth about what's happening. But we're judged. I remember being in the grocery store and I would make Joshua, he had to have both hands on my hips or on the basket, or he was in the basket, because he would just kind of run everything off of the shelves. And here I have this kid. I need to try and teach him how to be civil, live a civil life, have a good life. And yes, he had very strict boundaries, as did all of the children. And I questioned myself. And then coming across the paperwork from all of his medical records I got after he died, I went back and I'm like, wow, wait a minute. Other people have been telling me things and I've got all of this documented. And it's by one particular family member that is spreading this bullshit. Now, Joshua was in a very specialized form of therapy with a world-renowned doctor, Dr. Mark Weinrot. He saw Mark for probably 4 years because Joshua, I think he had gender dysphoria. It made sense. It's in the medical records. He was stealing underwear and he was taking my clothes. And at first I was just pissed. I was angry because it costs a lot of money. And then I'm thinking, wait a minute, what's happening with my son? So this is what, my gosh, what is it? This person, a friend of mine, was saying, your family members kept reaching out to me to warn me about you. They even offered to testify in court. Oh my gosh, that's so crazy. All right, let me tell you a little bit about my family before I get into this so you know. Yes, I'm a Christian. No, I'm not a Bible thumper. No, unless you know me, you're not going to know that I'm a Christian. That belongs to me. I don't think it's my place to go and tell everyone else what to believe or what I believe. If they ask, I'll answer. But if not, I don't say anything because I don't like it when it's done to me. So I think it was the oldest, it was the oldest child in the family that was saying that Joshua was extremely abused, which was true. He was extremely abused by his siblings, as is documented in all of his therapy reports and at the hospital. So when Joshua started taking my underwear, I brought it up with Charlene. It's like, what's going on? Is there a sensory issue? Is the fabric of his underwear, is that bothering him? Is because I knew that he had to have all the tags cut out of his clothes, and she had several sessions with him, and she said, you know, you need to very seriously consider seeing this other therapist named Mark Weinrod, which we did after we found Barbies that had been taken from my daughter. They were in bondage. There were a lot of weird things that were happening, which scared me. Why that scared me so much was the worst thing that could happen is if I knew my son had a problem and I didn't address it and he harmed another person. I wouldn't be able to live with that. The second thing is, what if something happened to my son? So this is what, it's really funny because several people have told me this, that this is something that this person has said. Joshua was one of the most abused. He started showing homosexual tendencies, and that I would tell him, because I'm a Bible thumper, that he was going to hell and that he would be a pedophile. And this part, I think, is absolutely amazingly just vile, that he was beaten so badly I wouldn't take him to the hospital because they would see marks. Guess what? He was in the hospital all the time for trying to kill me, for trying to hurt another child, for running into the stop sign. Joshua had no real sense of pain. It's like when he had his appendix, it was almost burst. He was sitting in the chair really quietly one day, which is the only way I knew Joshua was sick. And I looked at him like, Joshua, what's going on? He said, oh, my stomach hurts. And kind of pushing around on him, I decided it'd be best to take him to the hospital. He had an appendix that was about to burst, and he told the doctor his pain level was around 3. So I don't even know where I went with that, but back to my paper here, that he was beaten so badly that I wouldn't take him to the hospital. Let me just say that is bullshit. I stole his money. What money did Joshua have? He had money that I paid him to do chores around the house. But the person that had said this is one that had stolen from my business on numerous occasions, is a drug addict, or was a drug addict, was addicted to pornography, was addicted to gambling. And I have to say was, because I don't know now, because I don't see this person. There are very strict boundaries that this person is not allowed to cross. So they said this. Part of this is true, and part of it is just BS. Let me address the homosexual part. I have cousins that are gay. I have friends that are gay. Some of my very best friends are gay. Family members are gay. I have a big part in the gay community in Portland. So this is just out of left field. Pedophile, oh my gosh. No, I didn't think he was going to become a pedophile. I thought that he, you're seeing the stuff about Ted Bundy and all of these serial killers, and you're watching your son that's showing some pretty disturbing tendencies. You're finding Barbies in bondage, and your underwear is missing, and all of this other stuff is happening. I kind of goose-legged out that underwear thing. What we ended up doing before we saw the specialist, his psychologist had recommended getting him different underwear that was made out of different fabric. So I did that. It didn't it didn't matter. And when I found the Barbies that were in bondage, that's so hard for me to say. I was afraid. I was afraid for the community. I was afraid for my son. I was afraid for my daughters. We took him to, like I said, this world-renowned therapist named Mark Weinrott, who dealt with criminal sexual behavior. And that was at the recommendation of several other of Joshua's doctors. So when we were in seeing Mark, he saw Mark for several years. And one of the things that Mark did, and it reminded me a lot of when I was a kid, and they had, I don't know if you guys remember this, they would have this program for stopping smoking. It was like a SHIC program or something, is what it was called, if I'm correct. And what happened was they would feel a mild shock if whatever happened. Mark Weinrott had different aversion therapies that he tried with Joshua. None of them worked. We didn't know everything we were dealing with at the time because he was a young adolescent at that point. When Mark first brought this next aversion therapy to me, I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't feel comfortable with this. I don't think that I didn't like it. He would have Joshua walk through, and he made a CD. How do I feel when this happens? What's going to happen? What's the worst thing that can happen to me? What do I do when I get up from the chair and I've made my mind up, I'm going to go steal my mom's underwear? What am I thinking when I decide to put duct tape around Barbie dolls? So he had Joshua go through and make the CD of the feelings that he was feeling and everything that was going on so Joshua could listen to it. Our job, my job as a parent, was he did have a shock collar around his thigh, the biggest part of his thigh, with his jeans on it or under it. I was supposed to have the remote, and at various times, Joshua was given a very small, I think that collar went from like 1 to 12, if I'm remembering correctly. So we did a 1, and we went back into the therapist, and he said, you need to raise it up. It's not bothering him at all. He still has the same things. So what he explained to me is he's trying to take Joshua's what's going on and associate those feelings that he was having, whether the doctor was right or wrong at that time. This is like 20 years ago now. What he did was in the best interest of Joshua and of other people. He had used it successfully with other people. Joshua liked it. He's like, I want my therapy, Mom. I don't want to do this anymore, Mom. I need the therapy, Mom. So I had the thing, and we'd go back, and the doctor would say, you need to take it up a notch. We did this for 2 years, and it got to one of the highest levels on this training collar that was around his leg, that was over a pair of jeans. Joshua had no reaction to it. And the doctor said, oh my gosh, I have never had anyone go through this and not have a reaction to it. It's not working. We're not going to do it. Okay, that's really good. But what that did, it gave this child, this adult, a little ammunition to be able to say, oh my gosh, you don't know what my mom's doing to Joshua. It's all documented. It sounds horrific. It wasn't as bad as it was. I did it to myself just to make sure I was going to, not torturing my son. And it was done under the supervision of specialists. So we get through that, and there comes a point when Mark says, I really don't think there's anything else I can do for you right now. Joshua sort of aged out of that program. It was hard. It was hard because when you don't have, I still had Charlene, but this is another therapist that was dealing with something else with Joshua. And when part of your help is pulled away, it's scary. You're on your own. I looked back at this when I was watching that movie and like the medical records, especially when I saw we were so afraid to take him to the hospital because of bruises. That is such a freaking mad lie from the pits of hell. If you saw how many times that child was in the hospital for one thing or another, for trying to kill me, for trying to kill his dad, for trying to kill one of his siblings, for his rages, for his delusions, pediatric appointments, his therapist appointments, he was in the hospital more than anyone in our family put together. I had no fear of that. There was one night we took him, we were also foster parents, which I think was a very huge mistake in our family for our older kids and also for Joshua. All the police knew us because we called the police immediately when there was a problem. The police advised us to have flex cuffs because Joshua was very, very strong, very strong. And this was about maybe 18 months after them coming out every other week because Joshua was having a rage and someone was in danger. They advised us to get flex cuffs and pepper spray because in their estimation, this is the Happy Valley Police, in their estimation, it would be the best method to contain Joshua and keep anyone from getting hurt until the police could come or until we could get him to the hospital. So there was one night before, it was actually afternoon, it was before we couldn't get to any of the stuff. Joshua came after me with a huge ceramic piece of art, and the words coming out of his mouth were like, oh my gosh. I mean, I can't even repeat them. I'm gonna F and kill you, you effing blah, blah, blah. He came after me and he was trying to kill me. So his dad and two brothers stepped in to pull him off of me. The police show up, we make a report, and we took him to the hospital because I wanted him to have a psych eval. I think at that time he was probably 12 or 13. Took him up to the hospital up here. I wanted him to have a psych eval because I needed to put things in place so he could get Social Security disability for when he was older and his dad and I were no longer able to take care of him. A doctor never came in. I had a broken rib and my wrist was cracked from defensive wounds. It's on the paperwork. They said it may take a few days to find a psych bed in Oregon. Just leave him here, come back tomorrow. A doctor never came in to speak with us. Never. The next day we showed up and because we were thinking he's going to have to stay in the emergency department until they find a psych bed. He loved to draw. I had lots of pencils and pens and papers and books and all sorts of activities that I had put together for him to use. Excuse me. In a way, I kind of thought, after I saw his expression, I thought, this is a mistake. This is a reward for what he did. So we sat there from about 9 o'clock that morning, waiting to see a doctor. About 4 o'clock that afternoon, we still hadn't seen a doctor or a social worker, and a nurse would just barely come in. We're sitting here thinking, do we really want our son in the emergency department for 5 to 7 to 14 days before they find a psych bed for him? No. We're waiting for doctors to come in because we're going to sign him out and take him home. Doctors never came in. I took my son, we packed his stuff up, and we went home. We told his therapist about it. We told everyone that was working with him about it. And when we were at lunch one day, his dad and I were at lunch, and it was funny. I said, CPS is going to call us. He said, why? I said, because the doctors are mad that we took Joshua out and we didn't wait on them. And my phone rang. And I happen to know the caseworker because we were foster parents. We went through the whole thing with foster parents. He's like, hey, Teri, we got a report from the hospital and this is just a formality. I need to come out. I need to talk with you. I need to talk with your husband. I need to talk with Joshua. I need to see the home. It's like, okay, come on out. So he sits there and he's talking to Joshua, and Joshua said, "No, I tried to hurt my mom. All my mom did was to protect herself. And the hospital wouldn't let me see a doctor, and they wouldn't talk to my parents." And then he looked at us, and he had our record, because I don't know what year this was. We probably had been foster parents in Oregon for maybe 6 or 7 years at that point. So we had a pretty thick file. We dealt with a lot of kids that had problems. And he said, "This is a formality. I just need to close it out and say I came here. We know you guys. We know the kids that you've dealt with, and we know the situation with Joshua. Don't worry about things." So we didn't. We were fine. So when this comes up, it makes me laugh in a way, and it makes me feel very, I don't know what the right word is towards this person. They must be hurting pretty badly to try and destroy my life and the life of my son, because Joshua was still alive when this happened. But I can't believe the people that have told me that, or that I was stealing from my business. I was stealing from Joshua. I was an addict, when these are all the things that this other person had done. I don't know if they still are or not. I haven't seen them in quite some time. So that's what we were going through with Joshua and with the other kids. What's really pretty amazing is when the other kids were out of the house, Joshua was a completely different person. He still had his rages, but they weren't as bad. He wasn't being abused. He wasn't being locked in pantries. He wasn't being held by his feet over a deck. He wasn't being forced to fight another sibling. So his symptoms they got quiet. Plus, he was in some great therapeutic settings at school, and he was in a horseback riding program, and I had him in so many things to try to find something that he could think of besides torturing Barbie that could lead, in my mind, to harming someone. So I'm watching this video, not this video, but I'm watching the show, and I am in tears. These moms are talking about how their kids were a year and a half, 2 years old, and they started regressing. Joshua never had any regression. He hit all of his milestones. He talked like a magpie, 100 miles a minute. He was very scientific. He was very artistic. He was very intelligent, we found out. And here I am. Yes, Joshua wore me out. There were times I came in and I had to shut my door and say, "Nobody knock on the door unless there's broken bones or blood. I can't deal with this right now. The police department is literally a half a block from our house." I look back on things like that, and I think at the time I was doing the best I could with what I knew, is that I needed to recharge so I could take care of Joshua, because everything was pretty much in our family revolving around Joshua at that point, and trying to get him into the best possible situation. Well, one night he went into a rage and he tried to kill me again. We flex cuffed him. We called the police. And the police, at that point, we've known these guys forever. The officer at that time said, "We're going to take him down to the Guitar Center so he can calm down." Joshua used to go there all the time, look at the guitars, play, and calm down. Music was his therapy. So they took him down there, and they came back, or they called us. They didn't come back to the house. They called us and said, "You need to probably have him stay at a shelter tonight." And I'm like, "Why?" And they had really 2 very good reasons for this. The first was my safety and the safety of the other people in the house, but his anger was coming at me. They didn't want anyone else hurt, and they wanted him to experience being downtown without his family. They're thinking it might shock him, wake him up. So I made sure I did all the wrong things. I made sure he had his phone. He had a new iPhone. I made sure he had all of the things kind of a home that I could give him, because I didn't realize at that time that he was going to be beaten for each item he had. I talked to him the next day. He still had his phone at that point. I talked to him the next day and I'm like, Joshua, if you go to therapy and you agree to take your meds, you need to come home. Mom, no, I love it here. Great. That failed. That was my son's first day of living on the streets, and he was on the streets for 10 years. Luckily, I had several police officers, and I was looking at their texts the other night because I've saved them. They would text me and say, okay, Josh was looking good. He's looking healthy. You don't need to worry. One would say, Joshua is out of it. He doesn't know what's going on. He thinks people are trying to see into his mind. Joshua had a thing with Bilderberg and the Illuminati, and they were after him. It was so bad that I had to come up with a make-believe app on my phone. So he would, every time he would go to the hospital, this is still why it's so laughable to me about we wouldn't take him to the hospital, because every time we'd go to the hospital, I would have my iPhone out, and I had a special little app that I would push that I told Joshua would scan the nurses and doctors to see if they had a chip, to make sure that they were human and they weren't bots. My son was messed up. He wasn't thinking correctly. The schizophrenia was taking hold of him at that time. So I'm down there with him, and the nurses and doctors knew I was going to scan them for Joshua because he wouldn't speak to them. Even, I had a release of information. I didn't realize how many release of informations and power of attorneys I had until I got those death records from the hospital. They wouldn't honor them. These are the things I would get from the doctors. When I would ask for a psych eval, we don't want to take his rights away. What do you mean you don't want to take his rights away? Do you want someone else hurt? Seriously? He needs a psych eval. We don't want to take his rights away. I heard that so many times. And then there was another doctor that came in, told me the very same thing. We don't want to take his rights away. So I looked at this doctor and I asked him, so you think he has the capability of making good decisions? Of course. So you'll take him home with you tonight and let him sleep down the hall from your wife and kids. He turned and walked out, and we never saw him again. These people knew what they were doing. Portland is this huge, in my opinion, what I have seen, grifting factory for the homeless. Multnomah County pulling a permit to build. You have a homeless tax on there. I don't know where the money's going, because it is not going to those kids. It's not going to the people out there. People think, oh, homeless crisis, they're trash. No, they're not. No, they're not. In the 10 years I was down there trying to help Joshua, find Joshua, feed Joshua, make sure he had socks and shoes and everything he needed, none of those people were trash. Some of them were users. Joshua wasn't using until probably 3 or 4 years into being homeless, except for THC. A big deal, THC. It wasn't any of the other things that Portland is so infamously known for. What I came to know from speaking with these people, they all had tremendous PTSD, trauma, or mental illness. They were self-medicating, and basically they were bankrolling a lot of grifty nonprofits and a lot of unscrupulous politicians. And I guess my attorney would have me say, that's my opinion. I'll have you know it's the opinion of a lot of people in Portland. It was horrible. I would talk to these people. I remember going down one day looking for Joshua. If I hadn't heard from him within 4 to 6 weeks, I would call the police, make a missing persons report. I would circulate flyers on Facebook. I would print flyers and go downtown. Well, this one particular day when I went downtown, I parked my car. There's this area in Portland called Park Blocks, and I was like on the north end of Park Blocks. And I stopped my car. They were having they fed the homeless in this area, I think is why I stopped there. Stopped my car, got out, and went to talk to the first person that really looked at me and made eye contact with me. And I always tried not to cry because I just tried not to. So many things had happened in my life that crying just to me was kind of getting in the way. And I went up to this gentleman who didn't want anything to do with me at first. And I said, I need to see if you can help me. He didn't even let me finish what I was saying. And he said, a pretty white woman in a Mercedes downtown, you're going to get anything you want. Instantly, I burst into tears. I lost it. And I am crying. And I said, the only thing I want is my son. I want to know he's safe. I haven't heard from him. I don't remember how long it had been. I haven't heard from him. I need to know he's safe. That man looked at me and he whistled. People came from everywhere and he was giving orders. This is Teri. You all know her son, Joshua. We're going to find him and we are going to make sure he's okay. They all had my phone number. I have phone numbers in my phone now still that say knows Joshua, knows Joshua, knows Joshua, because, you know, the homeless, they're changing their phones, taking phones, stealing phones, getting new phone numbers, whatever, and over and over and over. But they would call me, hey, we just saw Joshua. He's doing okay. We just saw Joshua. He's not doing well at all. And they would text me pictures. That was, I guess, one of the first times of my experiences in dealing with a lot of the people downtown. And that made things very easy at that point because I had been seen as an outsider that was trying to destroy the way they lived. These people have a community. Their trauma brings them together in their living and protecting each other. And to see that was something that was actually pretty cool. They all knew him. Nobody would lead me to him because even though they knew me and what I was saying, they really didn't trust me. But they came around to trusting me. There's one guy called Cowboy. I don't know if he's still there or not. And I can't remember a lot of the names, but I would go down. And it's like, oh, Joshua's down there two blocks over and go to the right. By the time I get there, the other people would say, yeah, he was just here. You just missed him. He went that way. So it was like chasing this kid through a maze. But what that did, it let the other homeless people trust me. They knew I was only there for my son. The last time I went down there when Joshua was homeless, well, that's sort of redundant. Of course he was homeless. The last time I saw him, no, I didn't see him. This is the next time I saw him. The last time I really went down there looking for him was on his last birthday in 2021. And I took 5, I wasn't thinking meth is very common on the streets out there. And I took 5 dozen specialty cupcakes looking for Joshua for his birthday. My friend was with me. We had these boxes of cupcakes. What was really cool was I would offer the cupcakes to the other people. A lot of them said, no, save those for Joshua. It's his birthday. Some of them would take them, I'd encourage them a little bit, Some of them would take them. And then it was the first time I was ever attacked in Portland. This guy had a knife. He was on a bicycle. He wasn't on a knife. He was on a bicycle. He sees there's cupcakes and he starts in front of a police officer. He's screaming and yelling and throwing a fit because he wants a cupcake. And I'm like, hell no, you're not getting a cupcake. You need to straighten your act up. Don't talk to me like that. And maybe I might give you one. But no, he came after me and my friend with a knife. And what was really pretty cool was the homeless seemed to come from everywhere and from nowhere. I mean, they were just all around this guy when the police officer was standing right there, steps away, and wouldn't do a thing. The homeless came out and said, Teri, walk that way. So my friend and I started walking, and then we're hearing screaming and beating and fights and fist hitting thing. I didn't look back, don't know what happened. And we're walking down, and there's still all this mayhem going on behind us. And I hear someone yell out, don't go past that yellow building. Like, okay, thanks, because we were almost there, turn around. I was able to give out the rest of the cupcakes to people, but I didn't see Joshua. He did get word that I was down there for his birthday and I was looking for him. And that was in June of 2021. In August of 2021, I got a phone call from a caseworker that he had aged out from. So I got this phone call and she's like, Teri, Joshua's lying in the street. He can barely speak. He can't stand up. He can't sit up. The only thing he's saying is, get my mom, get my mom. So I hightailed it down there, and I'm on the phone with her trying to really locate where Joshua was, because where the homeless are downtown, back in 5 years ago, 4 years ago, it was kind of localized. But it was still, there's a lot of land to go through, a lot of alleys, a lot of streets. Finally, we located him. And it was at that point when I saw him, I knew the end was probably pretty close. He was completely out of his mind. He had lice in his beard, in his hair. He was barefoot. He had feces on his clothes, on his feet. He did want something to eat. I went down and got him something to eat. And I knew at that time I wasn't dealing with just autism. I knew that the schizophrenia had pretty much taken over and whatever else, because Joshua was just gone. I have 3 or 4 pictures of him that day, and I can't really look at him. There's one I have, I can see it's just his foot. So that was August. I think it was like August 21st, August 20th, August 21st of 2021. I sat there with him forever, and this car stopped. I think the name of the group was, actually, I've got the text still on my phone. I think their name was Transition Projects or Transitions Project, something like that. The guy that got out of the car was Brian Cooper. That's his name. I told him Joshua's story, and they gave me hope. They were going to put him at the top of the list. They were going to make sure he got housing. They were going to make sure he got this and this and this and this and this. So finally, after hours, I left. And I actually spoke with the supervisor there with this nonprofit. Didn't hear anything from him for 2 weeks. So I got a hold of him again. Oh my gosh, I don't even remember what their excuse was at that point. And then I'm like, these people are just scammers. They're just scam artists here taking advantage of taxpayers and the homeless. I just dropped it. I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. I still would look for Joshua. I still had, people telling me about things. And then it was on, no, at that time it was October 8th, about 1 o'clock in the morning. My son Michael knocked on my door, and his face was just ashen. And he said, "Mom, you need to come upstairs." I'm like, "Michael, it's in the middle of the night. What's going on?" He said, "Mom, you need to come upstairs. The police are here." I remember asking him, "Is it Joshua?" And he shook his head. So I got upstairs, and the officers are ones that I had not seen because Joshua had been out on the streets for so long. And they said, "Ma'am, you need to sit down." I said, "I don't need to sit down. I need you to tell me what happened." "Ma'am, we need you to sit down." "Okay, I don't think you understand how this is going to go here. I need to know if my son has hurt someone or something's happened to him." Well, as it turns out, okay, this was the early morning hours of October 8th. They had found his body on October 7th, or they had gotten a call about his body October the 7th, around 11 o'clock in the morning. And the investigation found out that he had actually died October the 5th, about 7:30 that night. It's all on CCTV. They saw Joshua get under the covers, and after about 10 minutes, there was no further movement. And people left him there. They left him there for 40 hours before they called anyone. And those were some of the most, I have to hand it to the medical examiner. I think her name was Elizabeth. She was so compassionate and so wonderful. But come on, the kid had been printed I don't know how many times. Run his prints. Don't make me wait until the middle of the night. Is that your protocol? Just go out in the middle of the night and tell parents when they are having a hard time comprehending? That really, that was hard. That was hard. I didn't know if it was positively Joshua. I called, like I said, I spoke with the medical examiner, and I was saying, well, he has a scar from an appendectomy. He's about 5'10". He has dark brown curly hair. His eyes are brown. She kept saying yes, yes. And I said, look on the back of his neck. I have a tattoo on the back of my neck now for Joshua. I said, he has a heart-shaped birthmark. on the nape of his neck. She came back and she said, yes, it's your son. So that was really, a lot of emotion goes through your mind. What do we do? What's going on? When is the medical examiner going to release him? They released him to the funeral home. I wanted him cremated so I could bring him home and know where he was all the time and keep with me. We went to the funeral home and we saw him. 3 of us did. His sister-in-law, his ex-sister-in-law, was actually the only member of the family to reach out and acknowledge Joshua's death. No one else did. And I know I got off track. I'm thinking about the autism. That show yesterday really left me feeling like I didn't do everything. Like there may have been one more thing I could have done. Why didn't we have, it's really irrational the way you think a lot of times. I know the reality that they didn't screen for autism when Joshua was born. I know the reality of all the testing we went through and all the counseling and everything I did. I know the reality that I did everything I could have done at that time. I don't know if it would be different now. I think parents of kids with autism or with any challenge, really, they blame themselves a lot for what's happening. What did I miss? It's like this kid of mine that's spreading these malicious lies. It's no wonder my family won't talk to me. It's weird because there was a special that came on after the one with autism, and it was talking about adult children that have psychological issues and how they will my kids used to do this all the time, how they would go to everyone and sort of drive a wedge between you and your family. And this person was very believable. When those green eyes fill with tears, you would believe anything that came out of this person's mouth. But a lot of it was projection. A lot of it wasn't describing me at all. It was describing her. But you know what? I'm glad, because I was able to see the character of everyone else around us and how toxic my family system was. One of the only people that really helped get me through things was Joshua's birth grandmother, Linda. I was in touch with her since the day he was born, and she got me through a lot of things. But yeah, that special yesterday, I guess what I would say is autism is such a huge spectrum. And watching that, like I said, it really made me wonder, did Joshua really have autism? So I dig out his medical records and I start reading through them. Yes, Joshua had autism. And I see all the other diagnoses the doctors had made. I see all the times he asked to see his mom that was denied. I see all the times he asked for a psych eval, which was denied, which were denied. They were all denied. My son with autism, mood disorders, paranoid schizophrenia became food for the greedy in Portland, in my opinion. Autism's hard. One of the moms yesterday said she realized they couldn't go out to dinner. There would be no more family vacations because their child is much more affected than Joshua was. The stories that these moms were telling, and I'm questioning myself again. Something just wasn't right. What did I miss? What did I miss? I think that's something that'll be with me forever. Oh, and then, on the anniversary of his death, I usually post some pictures of him and one of his songs, use a musician, and just say how wonderful he was and how much I miss him. And I thank his friends. And I used to be a real big, I was into the blues community, blues and jazz in Portland. I took a lot of photographs. I had a lot of friends. I really kind of backed off of that. The election really let a lot of toxicity be seen from people who had absolutely no filter. And I ran into one the other day at a gig I was at with a friend of mine, and I love this person, but I couldn't get over the hateful things that had been said. not about candidates. People are going to do that all the time. But when you start getting personal, you talk about whoever votes for another person, and you're really part of dividing America. I don't have any time for that. Anyway, this blues woman, she was on my page as a friend because that's what I do. I do a lot of photography. She said to me, she sent me a message, and she said, I wonder if I can pull it up here, because I blocked her because she became so annoying. Oh, here it is. Oh my gosh. She said, I see you couldn't post because you're embarrassed about your boy. No, that's not what happened. I turned comments off because people just get weird. Oh, and I said, I'm not embarrassed about my son at all. And she says, it's okay to admit you're a failure. I'm like, who the hell are you? I don't even know you, and you're telling me this stuff? So, keyboard warriors are horrible. And she's telling me that money can't fix anything. No, money can't fix a lot. Good social services would help. So she's going on and on and on about how it's my problem. I'm the one that caused this thing with Joshua. That mental illness is made up, and that they're drug addicts because, and Joshua was not a drug addict, that they're drug addicts because their parents were drug addicts. I'm like, are you this other kid of mine that's like in a different profile and you're feeding me this crap? I blocked her. Well, I'm going to spend my energy on her. And then I posted something on Instagram about Joshua. She came on Instagram actually, and she's like, see, this proves my point. Because I'm like, what? Because I put his pictures with Josh Groban's song, Starry Night. It's like block, 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 block. So people don't understand. And so having a child with autism is a very difficult, it's very difficult on the family because people don't understand. They think your kid's just being a brat and you're not being a good parent because you're not disciplining them, or you're not doing this, you're not doing that. And so it must be your fault that they have these problems. And the stuff came out about Tylenol, and I took Tylenol when I was pregnant. I don't know if his birth mother took Tylenol or not. I know there seems to be in studies a lot of genetic causes, a lot of the disorders that Joshua suffered from. And his birth mother did have a lot of the things that Joshua suffered from. Unfortunately, Joshua had a much more complex mental deck of cards, if you could say, than she did. If you're the parent of an autistic child, you're doing everything you can do because you love your child. If you don't have a child with autism, don't give advice to anyone that does, because you don't know what you're talking about. I had the best of the doctors telling me things about Joshua, and it was completely fabricated. None of it was true. One thing I did do when I got the diagnosis from OHSU, that he did have sensory integration dysfunction, but for him it fell under the umbrella of autism. What a gut kick that was. But I took that report, and every doctor that had turned us away and not helped, I sent them a full copy of the report and said, this could have been avoided had you taken me seriously. So yeah, I'm not a mom that's just going to sit back, or I wasn't, especially with my kids that had disabilities. It's weird, people say, so how many kids do you have? Like, well, I have 5 kids, but one of them is no longer living. I can't say I have 4 kids, because that would be in my mind removing Joshua from that. And no, Joshua's very much a part of my life. There's so many things I wish I could have seen. I wish I had cameras in my house. I wish I could have had proof of what other kids told me in real time, so I could take care of it. And it really makes me angry that these kids were so scared because of the threats that they had received from their siblings, that they didn't feel it was safe to come to us until we had drawn very strict boundaries with those kids. I think it's also really sad that people that are so vengeful and angry feel they have to take everything from you. I sent my cousin a friend request the other day on Facebook. She ignored it. I'm friends with her brother. Her brother and I get along great. I love her brother. But yeah, it's been difficult because this one person has said all of these things, but you know what? Nobody talks to me about it. I just know that, well, you should have done this and you should have done that. Really? Were you in my house? It's hard, guys. It's hard enough having a child that has a disability, that has challenges. And I wouldn't say it's harder to have a child that has challenges that is also fairly well adjusted, I guess, in a way. Joshua he had great social skills. His goal in life was to make people laugh, to lift their spirits. But he was suffering from these mental illnesses and the abuse that he received at the hands of his siblings that it's just not right. I still have this thing up on my thing about he started showing homosexual tendencies. My gosh, how absolutely ridiculous. I wouldn't have friends if that was it. I have a lot of gay friends. I wouldn't have any friends if I felt like that. I wouldn't have any of my family if I felt like that. You know, it's just, give me a break. Just stop lying. Have enough confidence in yourself to speak the truth, for God's sake. Stop trying to file my image in your brother's image because you're so freaking vindictive. Life's a lot of fun, isn't it? There's always something when you think you've got one bridge crossed and that fire put out, and then there's another one that's burning right in front of you. I am very thankful that I'm very close with my uncle and his wife, my aunt, and my cousin, and with my other cousins and my aunt on my dad's side. I'm very close with them, and I've been messaging some with one of my other aunts. So I'm very thankful. And then with my cousin that lives in California, he and I would have such a blast. I want to go down there with him. He does a lot of YouTube stuff, and I would love to go down and join in on his YouTube and just have a good time. But yeah, I guess I'm rambling now, and so I need to call it a day. You guys, leave your comments. I am going to have this strictly moderated because I don't need hate thrown at me. I'm blocking that stuff out. If you're going to have hate, you don't need to be a part of my life. If you're going to have compassion and goodwill, yeah, that's cool. I like that. There's too much hate and negativity in the world today. But I want to let, I guess, you moms, you parents with children with autism know it is a struggle. But it's very much worth it. It's very much worth it. Don't doubt yourself. Listen to your gut. Your gut will tell you more than any doctor will tell you. So let's wrap up. I hope that you will subscribe, listen, share. I know I've been off schedule with my podcast because, truthfully, I didn't realize how much this podcast was going to open a lot of unhealed wounds for me. And I had to just pretty much back off for a while and deal with that. I hope to be back and running pretty quickly. And you guys take care. I appreciate you. Thank you. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube, give it a like, leave a comment, share it. What it does, it helps get it out to other parents and other people that are struggling just like we are. And sometimes I think that's the best thing that can happen is to see a parent completely unfiltered telling you how it is. And you don't feel quite so alone. So I will see you guys when I do. Until then, hope everything is fantastic for you.